Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. And in this video, I'm going to be giving you my top starts and sits for week 13 of the 2021 fantasy football season. And then at the end of the video, we're also going to recap our calls from week 12. And before we get into my top starts and sits for week 13 of the 2021 NFL fantasy football season, I must also say that the Thursday game did already happen, so we're going to be talking about the rest of the games and the players that I like in those games. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. So we're going to start with my startums. I'm going to go position by position and then move on to my situms. So the first guy I'm going to talk about is Kirk Cousins, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. And when I take a look at the quarterbacks on the week, there are a lot of sort of obvious plays at the top of the rankings, but I'm trying to find some quarterbacks that are a little more under the radar. And I think Kirk Cousins is a guy that you can play this week as a nice, safe play with a little bit of upside. He gets to play the Detroit Lions. They don't have the best defense. They're not technically giving up the most points to quarterbacks or anything, probably because they're giving up quite a few points to running backs. But I think Kirk Cousins will need to at least throw, a couple touchdowns in this game. So I think he's a pretty safe play. Dalvin Cook is out, so Alexander Mattison, who we will talk about later in this video, will be starting at running back for the Vikings. So Mattison is a great fill-in running back. They might be able to establish the run against the Lions, which could limit Kirk Cousins' upside. But I still think Kirk Cousins is a safe play. And if they do decide to air out the ball a little bit against the Lions, then I think that's where you start to see Kirk Cousins have some of that upside. So for me, he is a low quarterback one this week. My next quarterback stardom for week 13 of the 2021 fantasy season is going to be Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. In week 13, he's playing the Washington football team, who they're giving up the most points to fantasy quarterbacks on the season, according to this chart. They have looked a little bit better, the Washington football team defense, that is. They have been playing better than they were at the start of the year, but I still think Derek Carr can find success in this game against Washington. You can kind of see his performances throughout the year. He's been up and down, but he does usually throw a lot of passing yards most games. I believe he leads the league as of the end of week 12. I believe he was the league leader in passing yards. So I think he is a nice safe play against a defense that doesn't really scare me, even though they are playing better. So for me, he is a high quarterback 2. All right, now we're going to move on to the running back position, and this is where I have a lot of players to talk about. So you're going to want to stay tuned for this. I'm going to start with some more high-end guys and slowly work my way down to more, under the radar type of guys. But the first player I'm going to talk about is Elijah Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers. I love him this week against the Seattle Seahawks. And by the way, we are going to be using half PPR scoring as I talk about these players, right? So Elijah Mitchell, when he's been on the field, he's been the lead running back, and he's been great for fantasy. Last week against the Vikings, 27 for 133 on the ground, 5 receptions for 35 yards through the air, 25 half-point PPR points. Unbelievable. This week he gets the Seattle Seahawks, who, if you look at this chart, the Seahawks are giving up the second most points to running backs on the season. The Washington football team just ran all over them last week, and I expect more of the same this week. And I think Elijah Mitchell is a locked-in running back play for week 13. Next up, we have Leonard Fournette, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I love him this week against the Atlanta Falcons. That defense does not scare me in any way, shape, or form. If you look at their points allowed, they're, in the middle to the upper part of the league in points allowed on the season, but the Falcons defense is just not that good. The Buccaneers could decide to score through the air more so than on the ground. So that's the only real worry with Fournette in terms of his upside. But regardless, I think he is a nice, safe play this week. And we saw in week 12, when the Buccaneers decide to score on the ground, that's where Fournette gets that insane upside. Last week against the Colts, a really good run defense on the year, 17 for 100 on the ground and 3 rushing touchdowns. He also had 7 receptions for 31 yards, and one of those went for a touchdown as well. So 4 total touchdowns, 40 points in half PPR. He's super involved on the ground. He's involved in the passing game as well. So no matter what route the Buccaneers go, I think Fournette will be heavily involved in this game. And the Tampa Bay Bucks are favored to win this game. So you know what that means, right? Later in the game, the Buccaneers might be running the clock down. That just means more work for Leonard Fournette. And even if for some reason the Atlanta Falcons are out to a lead by some miracle, Fournette's going to still be in the game getting passing work. So he is a safe play with tons of upside. We saw that last week with his 40-point game. Sorry about that car that just drove by. But yeah, Leonard Fournette, he is going to be like a locomotive train in this game. He is a running back 1. Another running back I am super excited to play this week is Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team. I actually don't have him in any leagues, but I wish I did for week 13. because he has looked great lately. You see 2 of his last 3 games over 20 fantasy points. Even in week 11 in a tough matchup against the Panthers, he almost ran for 100 rushing yards. He did lose a fumble, so he only finished with 7.5 fantasy points. He did not have any receptions in that game. But week 13, there's a couple things going into play, right? Antonio Gibson, he's looked a lot healthier lately than he did earlier in the year, coming off of that week 9 bye. So I think maybe that bye week gave him a little bit of time to heal from his injury. Week 13, he gets the Raiders, who are giving up the 8th most points to eighth most points to running backs on the season. He just played the Seahawks, who are giving up the 2nd most points. He looked amazing against them. He almost saw 30 carries on the ground, and he saw 7 targets, caught all 7 of them. That's insane. Week 13 against the Raiders, J.D. McKissic, the Washington football team's pass-catching specialist running back. He's kind of been vulturing some catches from Antonio Gibson over the course of the season. McKissic is out for this game. So that just means that Antonio Gibson should see even more stable passing work through the air. So when you combine the great matchup, the rushing work that he's been seeing on the ground, the possibility for increased passing work, and another thing I just thought of is a lot of times we'll see Antonio Gibson get game scripted out if the Washington football team is down on the scoreboard. We'll see McKissic be on the field more, Gibson less. So in this game against the Raiders, 2 things. I don't think the Raiders will necessarily be able to pull away from the Washington football team. I think this projects to be a pretty competitive game. And even if the Washington football team is down on the scoreboard, without McKissic there, Gibson's going to still be on the field getting pass catching work unless the Washington football team does something really surprising. So I've kind of been rambling about this guy for a while here because I just really like him this week against the Raiders. So for me, he is a low running back 1 on the week, but he has a lot, and I mean a lot of upside. Another stardom running back that I love this week is going to be Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. This is the game that we have all been waiting for all season. I made him a buy low in one of my buy low, sell high trade videos, and if you bought low on Javonte Williams, you are very happy to start him in week 13 for a couple reasons. Mainly, Melvin Gordon, their other running back, let's just call him. He is out for this game, last I heard. Or at least doubtful. He's either doubtful or out, I can't remember. He's not projected to play. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon have been splitting the work in the backfield pretty much 50-50 all season, but now Javonte Williams gets the backfield to himself. Obviously, he's not going to see 100% of the touches, but I think Mike Boone is their running back too. So while I do think Boone will see some work, I think Javonte Williams will be the lead running back in this game. And it is a matchup against the Chiefs. It's not necessarily the most favorable matchup in terms of points given up to running backs on the season, but it's not a scary matchup by any means, in my opinion. He should see a great number of carries on the ground. He's seen stable passing work production through the air. I think without Melvin Gordon there, we might see that, when we might see him get a couple more targets, hopefully another catch or 2. So to me, he is a really safe play I have him as a mid running back 2. But if Denver gets the running game going, if it's a competitive game, he has a ton of upside. So I have him as a running back 2, but we could see that upside really shine through if the game script goes not according to plan, but if it goes in favor of the Denver Broncos. And I really think that this could be a breakout game for the rookie. And of course, in the weekly running back stardoms, we do have to attack the New York Jets pretty much every week. So I'm going to talk about 2 running backs for the Eagles. First up, we have Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. He's taken on the New York Jets this week in week 13. I believe they're giving up the most points to running backs on the ground. Yes, they are. I mean, every week it seems like you can find production at the running back position when they're playing the New York Jets. So this week, Miles Sanders gets to take on the Jets. Last week against the Giants, I believe he got dinged up in that game. So he didn't see a ton of volume. The week before, he saw 16 carries. Last I heard, he is expected to play. So just monitor the news. If for some reason Sanders does not play, obviously he's not a stardom. But he should be the lead running back against the Jets. It's a great matchup. He has big playability. Jalen Hurts, their starting quarterback, is also out. Now, Jalen Hurts is more of a mobile rushing quarterback. So now Gardner Minshew is going to play. So I'm not really sure what that's going to mean for the backfield running backs there. I think obviously Gardner Minshew is going to have less rushing attempts. Gardner Minshew will have less rushing attempts than Jalen Hurts would if Hurts was playing. So I think maybe we see more carries go to the running backs. We could also see more dump offs to the running backs because a lot of times mobile quarterbacks, they'll take off and run instead of dumping it off to the running back. Whereas Gardner Minshew, while he does have some mobility, I think he might look to target the running backs a little bit more than Jalen Hurts. So we could see that happen. So Miles Sanders, to me, he is a smash play. I like him as a running back 2. And also one more thing before we move on to Boston Scott. Their other running back, Jordan Howard, is out for this game. So if Howard was playing, you might see kind of a 3-headed approach. I think Jordan Howard would see at least a handful of carries, but it should just be pretty much Miles Sanders and Boston Scott in this game. So even though he hasn't been great for fantasy for a while, pretty much since week 1, I think this could be a get-right game for Miles Sanders heading into the bye week. So yeah, he is a running back 2 play for me with a lot of upside because in this matchup, if he, it's a great matchup and he could always rip off a big play. Miles Sanders does have that ability. And then next up, Boston Scott, same backfield without Jordan Howard there. And in this great matchup, if Boston Scott does play, I think he is another smash play. I like Miles Sanders a little bit more, but we saw last week when Miles Sanders got kind of dinged up, Boston Scott actually led the team in carries, I believe. I think because, what was it, Sanders had like single digits. Boston Scott had 15. So I think they're both safe plays. He is dealing with an illness right now, Boston Scott is, so monitor the news, see if he's active, see if he will be limited at all because of his illness. But yeah, if both are healthy and active and they're getting their usual workload, I think both are nice plays. I like Boston Scott a little bit more as a running back 3, but we really don't know how the Eagles are going to use these running backs, so Boston Scott could end up being the better play. I just picked up Boston Scott off the waiver wire in a league, and if he is active, I'm going to play him because I have a ton of players on bye, and he is the perfect bye week fill-in. So yeah, Boston Scott I like as a running back 3. Miles Sanders I like as a running back 2. And I probably should have talked about this guy sooner because I said I was going to start with the higher end guys first, but here we are. I forgot. We're going to talk about Alexander Mattison, running back of the Minnesota Vikings. There's really not much to say about this. The Minnesota Vikings are going to be without Dalvin Cook, their usual bell cow running back. So Alexander Mattison is going to be their starting running back. We've seen in the past when Alexander Mattison fills in for Dalvin Cook, he is a great fantasy option, right? The Vikings have a good offense. Alexander Mattison is a good player. And this week, in week 13, he gets to play the Detroit Lions. It's pretty much a dream matchup other than the New York Jets. The Lions are giving up the 4th most points to running backs on the season. I think the Vikings can run all over them. Like I said, I do like Kirk Cousins in this game as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Vikings attack the Lions, if they more so go through the air or on the ground. But I do think Alexander Mattison is a safe play regardless. If you have him on your team, he's pretty much a must start in this matchup against Detroit. So long story short, I like him as a running back 1 in week 13. And I know it feels like we've been talking about running backs forever, but I have one more running back to talk about. And in that same game as Alexander Mattison, on the other side of the field, I like Jamaal Williams of the Detroit Lions this week at the running back position. It's kind of the similar situation that Alexander Mattison has. Their lead running back is going to be out for this game for both teams. So Dalvin Cook is out for the Vikings. DeAndre Swift is out for the Lions. So Jamaal Williams is going to step in and be the lead running back for Detroit. And this is just a situation where I think the workload makes him a solid play this week. I don't necessarily know where the Vikings rank in terms of points allowed to running backs. So they're actually giving up the 9th most. I am a Vikings fan. I watch all their games. Their defense is really not that good this year. So it doesn't scare me at all. And just given the workload elevation that Jamaal Williams will see, the possibility that maybe you got him off the waiver wire, he is a great play this week against the Vikings. And one thing to note about Jamaal Williams is he has the capability of being involved in the passing game. He's a good pass-catching running back. So with DeAndre Swift out, with Jamaal Williams being the starter, and even if the line's getting down, if they are down on the scoreboard, Jamaal Williams still should be in there getting passing game work. So he's a safe play actually this week, filling in for Swift, and I like him as a running back 2 for week 13 against the Vikings. Now we are going to move on to the wide receiver position. I have a few players to talk about here, not as many as the running backs, but I really like these guys this week. So the first guy I'm going to talk about is Jalen Waddle. Now, obviously, when I do these lists, I don't like to just talk about the obvious players. I'm not going to say, oh, start Tyreek Hill, even unless he was coming off of a stretch where he was doing really poorly or something. But I'm going to talk about a guy who on the season has been amazing, and he might be a little under the radar. Rookie wide receiver Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. look at his production lately in half PPR. Pretty much since week 6, he's been unbelievable. You know, this might not be a guy that you realize, but he has been absolutely phenomenal for fantasy football. And in week 13 against the New York Giants, I do expect that to continue. The Giants on the season, they're like middle of the pack in terms of points giving up to wide receivers. So that's fine. That's fine. Jalen Waddle, that's fine. He can play a team like that and be productive. He's played all sorts of different defenses, and he's been fine. He only had one bad game against the Buffalo Bills, who are, at that point, they were like a shutdown defense. So I think he's a safe play because you see his target volume. It's very, very stable. He's been seeing healthy targets all year long, pretty much. And last week against the Panthers, we finally saw that big play. He had a 57-yard reception. I believe that was a touchdown catch. And I said in a different stardom sit-in video, or maybe it was a buy low, sell high video. I don't remember, but I did say earlier in the season that Jalen Waddle does have big play ability. We just hadn't seen it yet. He's a blazing fast player. We saw it last week against the Panthers. So in week 13, every week, pretty much, he's a safe PPR play. But if he can break off that big play, that's where the upside comes in. So for week 13, he's a mid wide receiver 2. And again, he does have that upside. The second wide receiver that we're going to talk about is Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So what do we say about Aiyuk, man? It's been a weird season for him. He started really slow, not very involved. Lately, he's been getting more involved. You can see his target volume sort of since week 8, it looks like. You know, he's 7, 8, 4, 7, 6 targets. So it's definitely improved. In week 13, Deebo Samuel is going to be out. Their usual kind of main option at the wide receiver position is not going to be active for week 13. So that just means that Brandon Aiyuk should see more opportunity for production in this game. The Seahawks, it looks like they're giving, they're in the middle of the pack in terms of points given up to wide receivers, but their defense really just isn't good. I do like Elijah Mitchell this week, the running back for the 49ers as well. So, but I still don't think the 49ers are just going to be able to run the clock out all game long against the Seahawks. I think they will have to throw the ball a little bit. I think a lot of those targets will go to Brandon Aiyuk with Deebo Samuel not active. George Kittle could get involved as well, but I think Aiyuk is a nice safe play this week. He's been pretty productive lately. Obviously, I don't like him as a, smash wide receiver 1 play or anything like that. But just with the injury to Deebo and with his recent involvement, I do like him as a low wide receiver 2 in week 13 against Seattle. And finally, I might regret this one, but I'm going to talk about T.Y. Hilton, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts, as a stardom. And listen, he has not been good for fantasy for a while, but for some reason, whenever he plays the Houston Texans, he just has their number. He seems to do well. Even this season, when he hasn't done much, in week 6, 4 for 80 yards through the air. That's a solid game. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he did get injured in that game. He did get dinged up. I don't know if he finished that game. But yeah, it's a weird thing. Against the Texans, he often plays well. So obviously, I'm not playing T.Y. Hilton if I have really elite options at the wide receiver position. But for me, with his long history of beating up on the Houston Texans, he is a nice, desperate flex play. I think you can put him in the lineup if you're desperate. I know I have a league where, dude, I'm playing Josh Reynolds and Tevin Coleman just because of all the bye weeks and injuries I have. So if T.Y. Hilton was on the waiver wire, I would love to pick him up and play him over Josh Reynolds. So yeah, he's a nice little desperate flex play against the Houston Texans. Now I have 3 tight ends to talk about as stardoms this week. The first one is going to be Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. And like I said earlier, I'm not trying to just give you guys obvious plays, right? I'm not trying to say, oh, start Travis Kelce. I'm trying to find some more under the radar type of guys that aren't necessarily at the top of the rankings. And Logan Thomas is just that. He was out for a while with an injury. He came back in week 12 against the Seattle Seahawks. He saw 6 targets, caught 3 of them for 31 yards. Nothing spectacular, but you have to look a little underneath the surface. He is a good tight end, first of all. To start the season, he was a nice, solid tight end play. And then even in week 12, to see 6 targets first game back from injury, that is really nice to see. He also almost came down with a touchdown in this game. So the potential for production, we already saw it in week 12. And in week 13, he gets to play the Las Vegas Raiders. We're giving up the most points to tight ends on the entire season. They've been giving up a lot of points to tight ends lately. And yeah, for me, Logan Thomas, He is a nice, solid, low tight end 1 play. Next up, we got Pat Freiermuth, tight end of the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like him as a tight end stardom this week against the Baltimore Ravens. He's just been really good for fantasy lately. That's all I can really say. Ben Roethlisberger has been looking his way. He's been throwing the ball down. He's not, he's been losing his ability to throw that deep ball. He's been looking for his tight end a little bit lately. You see his target share since week 6. His targets per game, 7. Bye week, 7, 6, 9, 7, 4. He has shown the ability to get in the end zone as well. Since week 8, touchdown, 2 touchdowns, no touchdown, touchdown. So, listen, he's no Kittle. He's not that type of play. But if you look at his production, he has been amazing for fantasy. A guy that you could have gotten off the waiver wire a few weeks ago. And if he's still on the waiver wire, I would pick him up. But yeah, he's been great for fantasy. And against the Ravens, they're giving up, looks like the 8th most points to tight ends on the season. So it's not like it's a bad matchup or anything. So I guess just stick with the guy who's been good for fantasy, right? So for me, Pat Freiermuth, I like him as a low tight end 1 this week against the Baltimore Ravens. And finally, I like Foster Moreau, tight end of the Las Vegas Raiders. Maybe you never heard of this guy, but you need to know his name because in week 13, Darren Waller, their usual superstar tight end, as of this recording, is listed as doubtful. So he's not projected to play. If Waller ends up not playing, Foster Moreau is going to be the starting tight end, the main guy at the tight end position for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's had some good games in the past with Darren Waller, kind of banged up. And this week against the Washington football team, I think Foster Moreau is a nice guy to pick up and play because let's be honest, a lot of us don't have good tight ends in some of our leagues in fantasy, right? So if you're looking on the waiver wire, you're desperate at the position. Foster Moreau is someone who was most likely not owned unless you're in the deepest of fantasy leagues. You can pick him up, put him in your lineup against Washington, and he will be a starting tight end for the Raiders. And I think he will be pretty involved in this game. And yeah, I like him as a high tight end 2. And you got to know this guy's name because I think when Waller is out this week, I think he could be productive for fantasy. And finally, we are going to move on to my sit-ems. This section is going to be a little less heavy. I only have 3 players to talk about overall. I have 1 running back, that being Rex Burkhead of the Houston Texans. Listen, man, the Houston backfield has been a mess all season. It's pretty much right now, it's Rex Burkhead and David Johnson. Yeah, even against the Jets, which is the best matchup for running backs in all of fantasy, Rex Burkhead was 12 for 27 on the ground, 3 for 27 through the air, 6.9 fantasy points in half PPR, and that was against the Jets. This week, if we look at the Colts on the season, I know they just gave up that big game to Leonard Fournette, but on the season, they're pretty tough against the run. I believe before that game against Fournette, they were quite a bit lower in terms of points given up to running backs. So that game kind of skewed things a little bit. But yeah, it is a tough matchup. And Rex Burkhead, for this backfield's a mess. Rex Burkhead isn't great for fantasy. So yeah, I would try sitting him in week 13. You more than likely have better options. And man, oh man, what happened to Courland Sutton, dude? What happened to this guy? I don't know what is going on with him, but lately he has been doing nothing for fantasy. You look at since week 7, since that 14 target game in week 6, after that in week 7, 5, 4, 2, 3, bye week, 3 targets. What's going on, Broncos? What's going on, Teddy? What are you guys doing? Well, part of it has to do with Jerry Jeudy, their other, star wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. He came back from injury, and since then, Sutton has not been involved in the passing game, and the Broncos kind of like to run the ball quite a bit. So, he hasn't been good for fantasy since week 7 against the Chiefs. The only potential really is if the Chiefs blow out the Broncos and the Broncos need to throw the ball to catch up. But even then, the Chiefs are kind of middle of the pack in terms of points giving up to wide receivers. The Chiefs haven't really been like the superstar team that they usually are. They've been in more competitive games this year. So against the Broncos, I mean, we could see the Broncos really lead on the run, even in this game. So just given the main thing is his recent lack of production. It's been weeks and weeks. I really just can't justify putting him in my lineup unless I'm really desperate and have no better options. So like in that league where I'm playing Josh Reynolds, then okay, maybe I'll put Courland Sutton in for him there, right? But in most leagues, when you're not dealing with crazy bye weeks or crazy injuries or both, you're probably going to try to avoid Courland Sutton. this week against the Chiefs. He's been struggling, and I'm just trying to keep him out of my lineups until he does show me something. So for me, he is a low wide receiver 3, and that's not really that inspiring. And finally, my final sit-em player is Hunter Henry, tight end of the New England Patriots. He did have a great run of touchdowns. 1, 2, 3, 4 games in a row with a touchdown, no touchdown, then a touchdown, then 2 touchdowns. So listen, the guy scores touchdowns against the Bills. They aren't necessarily the best matchup for tight ends. You look at their points on the season. I know the tight end points given up to stats are kind of weird because a lot of it depends on who you play at the tight end position. Like if you play against Travis Kelce, obviously you're going to be giving up more points than if you play some random team, random tight end. But the Bills, they've been pretty tough against tight ends. So for me, Hunter Henry, you look at his yardage, it's just not really there most weeks. He did have a 75-yard game at one point, but that was the outlier. And that was against the Houston Texans. The Bills are no Houston Texans. They got a better defense than the Texans, right? So in week 13 against the Buffalo Bills, he is a touchdown or bust mid tight end 2. So that's going to do it for the startums and situms for week 13. Now I'm just going to quickly recap our calls from week 12. And it was very rough at the quarterback position. I like Tom Brady as a mid to high quarterback 1. He finished as the quarterback 21 on the week with only 12.24 points. Leonard Fournette just took all the touchdowns in that game. So what are you going to do? Other than that, I also said that I liked Jalen Hurts, quarterback 27. Are you kidding me? I mean, bruh. And who did they play? They had a good matchup. They played the Giants. I expected Hurts to be a nice safe play. He just did not get it done for fantasy. Only 9.86 points. And then Cam Newton, I liked him as a low quarterback 1. The dude finished as a quarterback 30, 8.18 points. He looked dreadful. It was awful. So yeah, at a quarterback, we really struggled. We're gonna move on to the running back starts that I called. Hopefully those were a little bit better. David Montgomery. I did not mean to type that in there. Boom. So yeah, I like David Montgomery as a low running back 1. He finished as a running back 28, only 8.9 points. So yeah, last week maybe wasn't the best week. Oh my goodness, Myles Sanders. He got a little banged up in that game, but only 6.9 points. So that was yet another miss. I mean, they should be showing you this, guys. You might think I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, obviously, I'm not a magician. I can't tell the future. But, man, I had some bad calls last week. One good call, though, who I also like this week. Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team. I liked him against Seattle. He did finish as the running back 5 on the week, 20.1 points. So, hey, you know, it wasn't a total miss. But back to the misses. I guess this was a good call. I was thinking about how I switched A.J. Dillon out for Aaron Jones. That was a bad call in one of my leagues. It cost me the matchup. But I did like A.J. Dillon as a stardom in week 13. I did mention, though, in that video that if Aaron Jones was back, that I liked him a little bit less. But we're still going to count it. A.J. Dillon, I liked him. He finished as a running back 13. 17.5 points. So we'll call that a good call. Because, I need these good calls where I can get them. Melvin Gordon, I liked him as a low running back 2. I thought maybe he could get in the end zone. 9.3 points, running back 27. Not a bad week, Basically a low running back 2, just outside of that. So not a great call, not a bad call. It was just kind of whatever. And I don't know, did he leave early in that game? Did he leave early? I don't know. He's out for week 13. So in week 12, I don't know if he left early, but yet this correlated with Tom Brady. I said I like Godwin and Evans. Godwin, wide receiver 80 on the week, 2.7 points, and then Mike Evans, 3.1 points, wide receiver 76. I mean, you got to be kidding me, man. You got to be kidding me. Last week was rough, but I feel like it was rough for a lot of people. Nothing made sense last week. And then Michael Gallup, this was a good call. I liked him as a low wide receiver 2. It's pretty much what he finished as. Wide receiver 19, 13.1 points in half PPR. We'll take that. We'll chalk that as a dub. Rob Gronkowski. I liked him as a low tight end 1 with upside, and he had that upside. 15.8 points. Tight end 3 on the week. So, hey, man, we're heating up here. Our calls weren't all bad last week. I said I like Dalton Schultz as a mid tight end 1. He finished as the tight end 5 overall. 14.1 points. Another fantastic call. And speaking of Fant and fantastic, Noah Fant was not fantastic at all. I started him in a league. It was a good matchup against the Chargers. Finished as a tight end 33. 2.7 points. I don't even know how that happens. I don't even know what went wrong there. But now moving on to the situms. We did have at least one good call. Ryan Tannehill. I said to sit him. He was a quarterback 29 with a depleted offense against the Patriots. Only 9 points. Yeah, that was a good call. That was a pretty easy one to see. Myles Gaskin, though, I said I liked him as nothing more than a running back 3 flex play. And boy, oh boy, did he prove me wrong. It was a tough matchup. They played the Carolina Panthers, right? Was that the game they played the Panthers? Yes. And he broke his trend of ping-ponging between good and bad games. So Myles Gaskin did actually finish as the running back 9 on the week, tied with Josh Jacobs, 18.2 points and half PPR. So tough matchup. Not the most consistent player. He just had a good game. You know, what can you do? So that ended up not being a good call for the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. But I did say to sit Courland Sutton last week, just as I did this week. And last week it worked out. I said I liked him as nothing more than a wide receiver 3. He finished as the wide receiver 80. 2.7 points, tied with Chris Godwin, a guy I said to start. So Sutton was a good call to sit. Godwin was not a good call to start. But I mean, come on. You're not gonna sit Chris Godwin. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Every wide receiver has bad games from time to time. We need to calm down. Put your pitchforks away. Another guy I said to sit, our final sit-in from last week was Marquez Valdes-Scantling, MVS, as some call him. He finished as the wide receiver 43, 7 points. I don't know why my throat is so dry. I don't know what just happened. I've been talking for like a long time, so maybe that's what it is. But yeah, only 7 points. He had an okay game, I guess, but I said I liked him as a touchdown, big play dependent, low wide receiver 4, 12, 24, 36, 48. So yeah, he was pretty much a wide receiver 4. So yeah, those were all of our calls from week 12. So not our best week. I will admit it wasn't our best week, but we're going to get things right in week 13. Hopefully. All right. I cleared my throat. I think we're good. I hope you guys are good. And I hope week 13 goes well for you. And yeah, that is going to do it for this video. So hopefully week 13, our stardom cinema calls go better than week 12. But thank you guys for watching. It is much, much appreciated. Make sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content. Please forgive me for my closet being open. We just had our carpet change, and now these doors don't close. So we didn't put them back on because the carpet is too high. So you can kind of see my pants right. And those are track spikes. But anyways, yeah, that's going to do it for the video, guys. Peace.